The Avengers vs. the Peter Factor, My Personal Redo, by midnightwolf2192. Chapter 11, Thor. Trigger warning, mentions of self-harm and sexual abuse. No graphic reference, but it is mentioned. Now, part of the beginning of this chapter is all of that horrible things, and I will be skipping over the descriptions, but you will get Thor's reaction to them. Thor wasn't hiding. He wasn't. He was the king of Asgard and the god of thunder. The god of thunder didn't hide. But if he ducked away whenever anyone tried to corner him, or jumped into empty rooms to avoid conversations, then, if the shoe fits. Thor had to destroy his home planet to save his people. He had caused Ragnarok, and now his people were stranded. How could he face them, knowing what he had done? Logically, part of him knew that he had saved them, but the larger part was calling him a failure for losing so many people. So, in order to forget, Thor had taken to drinking. He did it in private so no one would know. He had an idea that Loki and Val knew, but neither had a leg to stand on when it came to coping mechanisms. Thor was sitting in a deserted conference room with a large bottle of rum when he first met Peter Parker. He had been sitting in a corner swigging the rum when the door had opened. A teenager walked in and sat down at the table in the middle of the room. Thor watched as he pulled out several textbooks and notebooks and started mumbling to himself. "Oh, I'm sorry," the boy said as Thor shuffled as he finally noticed that he wasn't alone in the room. "I didn't think anyone else was in here. I needed to get some homework done, and Mr. Stark is blowing up the lab. Normally I would be so down for that, but I really need to get this work done." As the kid spoke, Thor stared at him in wonder. People all over the compound had been looking at him in either awe or sympathy. But this boy was doing neither. He knew Jane was here somewhere, but he had been avoiding her, more so than anyone else. He had seen Lady Darcy and Eric, but they had only been quick interactions. Thor didn't deserve to be in their presence. "'Tis fine, young one." Thor's voice was gravelly from the lack of use, and slurred from excessive alcohol consumption. The boy looked up from his books again, and stood. Thor watched as he approached, and he felt the boy's gaze lock onto him. "Mr. Thor, sir? I don't think the solution is at the bottom of a bottle," the boy said. Thor rolled his eyes and finally made contact with the teen. Rather than looking at him in pity, as Thor had expected, the boy looked disappointed. The look reminded Thor of his mother, which made him angrier. "Probably not, but I'll never know if I don't try," he said. He saluted the boy and took another mouthful of rum. The boy frowned and sat down in front of him. "Why are you here, child?" "Well, initially, I was going to do some homework. But now I think that you need someone to talk to," the boy said. Thor scoffed and took another drink. "Or, if you won't talk, you can listen." "I am a god," Thor said, and surprisingly the boy rolled his eyes. "And?" the boy said, surprising Thor with his sass. "You're a god. Yep, and so is your brother. That doesn't mean you are above emotion or above listening. It also doesn't give you the right to talk to me like I'm nothing." "You are a mortal. Your lifespan is insignificant compared to mine," Thor said. If he had been in his right mind, he would be mortified that he was speaking to a child like this. But the rum had loosened his tongue and lowered his inhibitions. "It may be shorter, but mine will probably be more fulfilling," the boy replied snarkily. Thor's jaw dropped as the boy spoke. Not many people had the balls to say something like that to him. While he was distracted, the boy leant over and grabbed the bottle of rum. Before Thor could say anything, the boy ordered Friday to open a window and he pitched the bottle out of it. "Now the rum is gone." "I'll go get more," Thor hissed out. Before he could stand, however, a white substance emerged from the boy's wrists and encompassed Thor's hands and legs. Thor strained against the substance, but couldn't move. "Release me, mortal." "Nope," the boy said. He ordered Friday to lock the door and close the windows, before he turned back to Thor. "And my name is Peter. Not mortal. Peter."
"Release me,"
Thor demanded again, but the boy just shook his head.
"How dare you?"
"Easily," Peter replied. He looked over at Thor and shook his head. "You know, I've lost nearly everyone I've ever cared about, and gone through quite a lot of shit. I know a thing or two about unhealthy coping mechanisms." That made Thor stop his attempts to escape. The boy looked young, but then again, to an Asgardian, every human was young. He was probably only in his teenage years, but would be considered nothing more than an infant on Asgard. But the longer Thor looked, the more he could see pain behind Peter's brown eyes. "When I was 4, my parents died," Peter said softly. "They were in a plane crash. I was then raised by my Aunt May and Uncle Ben. At first, I had no idea what was going on. I just thought I was having a holiday. I was 6 before I finally came to the realization that my mum and dad were never coming back. I didn't handle that well. I shut myself off completely. Refused to speak, hardly ate, just ignored the world." Thor remained silent as the boy spoke. For some reason, he was becoming invested in the child's story. "Then, when I was 8, I made a friend. Well, I thought I did," Peter said. Thor watched as a shudder ran down the boy's back, and his gaze hardened. "His name was Skip."
"What happened?"
Thor asked softly. Peter took a few deep breaths before continuing. "He stole a lot of my innocence that day."
Thor saw red.
In his youth, he had called for war. But even he knew that you never touched a child. Children were innocent, and therefore not to be touched. The fact that this human swine had harmed a child in the most intimate and soul-crushing of ways made Thor violently angry. He could feel the anger rising in him, and it was only when Peter's hand rested on his arm that he realized he was beginning to summon thunder and lightning. "Deep breaths, Mr. God Thunder, sir. Deep breaths," Peter murmured. Thor took a few deep breaths and found himself looking into Peter's eyes. The boy wasn't scared of his display. If anything, his eyes were projecting calm.
"Please tell me he's been taken care of,"
Thor hissed. "I made a friend at school. My best friend, Ned. He was the one to help me understand what Skip had been doing was wrong. He was there when I told my aunt and uncle. Skip was arrested and has been in jail ever since," Peter said comfortingly. Thor nodded and mimicked Peter's soothing breathing pattern. Once the thunder and lightning had disappeared, Peter continued. "Took me a while to recover from that. At first, well, he self-harmed, basically."
"Please tell me that is all. That is more than enough for one person to handle,"
Thor pleaded. But as Peter smiled sadly, Thor knew there was more to come. "I wish. When I was 14, so last year, I was on a school trip and was bitten by a radioactive spider," Peter said. "I was so sick, I thought I was going to die," Peter said. "Once I got better, I had these amazing superpowers. But I couldn't tell anyone. One night, Uncle Ben and I were going to the store. Aunt May needed milk, so off we went. We were inside the shop when a guy came in. He had a gun and was robbing the place. Uncle Ben tried to talk him out of it, but the guy shot him.
Uncle Ben died in my arms that night. No one's above,
Thor whispered. Peter nodded sadly at him. He had moved so that he was sitting beside the god, and Thor was surprised when Peter rested his head on the god's shoulder. My aunt and I tried to keep it together, but neither of us handled it well. Aunt May threw herself into work, and I threw myself into Spider-Man. I was going out every night hunting the guy down, but I also wasn't caring about myself. I came home every night with bruises and injuries. I was barely sleeping, and I was starting to distance myself from my friends again. I just couldn't stop. I felt responsible for Uncle Ben's death because I figured I had powers, so I should have stepped in, but I didn't.
But that is what parents do. They protect their young,
Thor said, and Peter nodded. It took a while for me to understand that. Aunt May and I had an argument, and after I called down, we managed to talk things out. I still sometimes feel responsible for his death, but my guilt is getting better, Peter said. He lifted his head and looked at Thor firmly in the eye. What I'm trying to say is, drinking and ignoring your problems isn't the way to cope. Shit happens, and unfortunately for you, a lot of shit has happened all at once. I'm not saying you have to talk to me, but talking to someone is the best. If you keep swimming in guilt, eventually you will drown.
I am the one who destroyed Asgard,
Thor said softly. He looked at Peter, who was just smiling comfortingly.
My sister, Hela, escaped from hell after my father's death. The only way to properly defeat her was to cause Ragnarok.
Sounds to me like you were trapped between a rock and a hard place, Peter commented. A damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
I just wish there had been another way,
Thor said, tears starting to slip down his face. Hindsight is 20/20, Peter said. A friend recently told me that it's the what-ifs that will kill you. You couldn't have done anything else in that situation. You need to focus on the good things. What are some good things?
I don't know,
Thor murmured. Peter raised an eyebrow, and Thor was again reminded of his mother.
My people are safe, but not many. Only...
Peter said, slamming his hand over Thor's mouth. Good things only. Your people are safe. Focus on that.
We have a chance to rebuild,
Thor said, and Peter nodded excitedly.
We can still tell stories of Asgard. We can and will remember Asgard.
Perfect, Peter said proudly. Just take it day by day. One little thing you're happy for each day will make things feel better.
Thank you, little one,
Thor said. He looked down at his wrists, and when Peter followed his gaze, he blushed bright red.
Would you mind releasing me?
Peter jumped up and raced over to his bag. He grabbed a small spray bottle, and Thor watched as he sprayed the substance. Soon enough, it had melted away. Thor climbed to his feet, and without warning, pulled Peter into a tight hug.
Thank you, little one. I will remember what you said,
Thor whispered to the teen.
I am in your debt. If you ever have need of me, do not hesitate to ask.
Thor walked out of his room, intending to go and join his people, while Peter returned to his homework. The next time Thor saw Peter, it was just after a meeting. Tony had called Thor into a meeting with the Norwegian government. They had had a large area of land they were willing to give to the Asgardians as a new home. The Norwegians were more than happy to have the gods from their mythology in their midst, so Thor readily accepted.
Stark Industries is funding the migration and the building of homes and whatnot,
Tony said as they exited the meeting room.
Stark. Tony,
Thor said slowly,
you have done so much for us.
Before Tony could answer, an explosion from a nearby lab had both men turning sharply. They raced down the hallway to the lab, and Tony yelled at Friday to open the door. Sitting behind a shield in front of a fume cupboard were a cackling Peter and Darcy. Both stopped laughing when they heard the door open. "Oh shit, we're busted," Darcy said as she turned and noticed who had entered the room. Darcy and Peter exchanged a look before they both shrugged and burst out laughing again.
"Two things. What the hell are you two doing in here? And two, why are you unsupervised?"
Tony demanded as he looked around the lab. Thor was stunned. The lab was covered in webs and a mixture of other chemicals. Smoke was billowing from some beakers on the floor, but both Darcy and Peter appeared unharmed. "Testing web formulas," Peter answered first before looking at Darcy and nodding. "Jane got distracted and left us alone. Her and Bruce were rambling, something supernova, something explosion, something." Darcy finished and Tony sighed heavily. "Friday, watch the brats. I'm going to find their babysitters and rip them new ones," Tony said before throwing his hands in the air and walking out of the lab. Thor watched him go before turning back to the laughing humans. "Hey, Thor," Darcy called. She patted the ground beside her quickly. "Come sit." Thor did as requested and Peter grinned at him. The grin was one Thor could imagine seeing on Loki back when they were younger, and he was about to cause mischief. "Wanna have some fun?" Peter asked slyly. Darcy was nodding excitedly from beside him, and Thor shrugged.
"Why not, young Peter? I could use a laugh. Today, while joyous, has been hectic,"
Thor said. "Perfect," Peter said excitedly. "Friday, implement Bombarda Protocol." "Bombarda Protocol initiated. Be careful, Peter," Friday said, a hint of amusement in her tone.
"What are we doing?"
Thor asked. Peter jumped to his feet and the god watched as Peter cleared away the 6 smoking beakers from the fume cabinet and replaced them with new ones. Each beaker had a white, viscous fluid inside of it that looked completely harmless. Peter then gathered a few bottles, test tubes and stoppers and walked back over to where Thor and Darcy were waiting. "So basically, these are rejected web formula combinations," Peter explained. "Mr. Stark wanted me to dispose of them, but Darcy and I realised that depending on what chemicals we add, we can make some interesting effects. One of the combinations made the webs glow in the dark, which is awesome. Some of the combinations we have kept because there might be a benefit for Spider-Man. Others just explode. And, well, who doesn't love a good explosion?"
"So, how can I partake?"
Thor asked. Darcy grinned and grabbed one of the chemicals from the pile Peter had brought over. She filled a test tube and put a stopper in the top before handing it to Thor. "We've been dropping these into the beakers and then racing back here," Darcy said. "Tony thinks we're not being safe, but we totally are. I mean, it's in a fume cupboard and we have goggles on. We are fine." "Thor needs goggles. He needs to be safe too," Peter yelled, and both Darcy and Thor laughed as the gangly teen jumped to his feet and rifled around in a drawer for a pair of safety goggles. When he found them, Peter tossed them over his head at Thor. The glasses hit the god on the head, causing Darcy to cackle evilly. "Shit! Sorry, Mr. God sir. Don't stress, shrimp," Darcy said before Thor could answer. "When I first met Thor, I tased him. And Jane hit him with her car. Twice."
I learned just how formidable Midgardian females were,"
Thor teased back. Darcy winked at him as Thor slid the goggles on.
"So I just pour this into one of the jars?"
"Yep, pretty much. Sometimes nothing happens. But that's the game," Peter replied. "The Bombarda Protocol just ensures no one else suffers if things go boom." Darcy and Peter's excitement was infectious, and Thor found himself grinning like a child as he walked over to the line of jars. He took the stopper off the tube, grabbed a beaker, and poured the blue liquid into it. Before he could put the beaker back in the fume cupboard and move away, the chemical reaction occurred. The blue liquid met the white fluid, and before Thor could react, it foamed up and burst all over the god. Thor looked over at Darcy and Peter, who were trying valiantly not to laugh.
"Oh, so that's how it's going to be, is it?"
Thor said with a raised eyebrow. He started advancing on the giggling humans, who both jumped to their feet. "Friday, open the damn door!" Peter bellowed as Thor let out a battle cry and started chasing both Darcy and Peter. The pair split up as they left the lab, but Thor decided to follow Peter. Tony was dragging a sheepish Jane and Bruce out of their lab when the three of them heard Thor's battle cry, followed by Peter's giggles. As they exited the lab, Peter barreled past them, followed closely by a blue, foamy God of Thunder. The scientist watched as the God of Thunder grabbed the teenager around the waist, pulling him into a tight hug, and rubbing the blue foam all over him. Tony simply rolled his eyes and tapped a few things on his Stark pad. Another Avenger had fallen. Thor looked down at the giggling teenager in his arms. He swore then and there that no matter where the universe took him, he would always protect Peter Parker. Peter Factor 12, Avengers 0. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Oh god, that starts really dark. And, oh god, so, for those of you who do not know, Skip Westcott is a character from the comics. I've never read any of these, but I've heard about it in the fandom community. And Skip is Peter's babysitter who sexually assaults him, basically. The fundamental part of Spider-Man is that he suffers but keeps going. I know that's a thing for most heroes, but it's exemplified in Spider-Man. I mean, as highlighted in this very chapter, Peter has lost so much, and he's only 15! And again, guys, if this has happened to you, please get help. There are people out there who will help you. And anyway, onto the things I like. I like how protective Thor is. I mean, Peter's showing Thor how human he actually is. And, well, I just like that bit with Darcy as well. She's such a kid in a genius woman's body that it's terrifying. And it's a lot of fun to read her. She's a good character. I wish she was in more of these chapters, actually, but what can you do? This is literally my favourite Avengers fic ever, so I'm not complaining. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.